and I'll be made up. Really will. I'm going to bring Derek Shelmerdine in now. Derek will be in. And there he is.
As if by magic.
That was magic. I meant to bring you in then, just not. Anyway, hang on a minute, please, Derek. Free subscriptions, a bit like, say, half a season tickets at Goodison. Anyway, Derek, good evening, because Derek is the author of this. It's an encyclopedia. It really is. This is unbelievable, this particular book. Rock and Roll Unraveled, from its roots to the mid-70s and punk. So everything is in there. It is really like, when I was studying, I had to do all primary sources, doing whatever I was doing. And everything had to be primary source. And I had to go and search high and low for primary sources, not secondary. And this particular book, Rock and Roll Unraveled, is a great source. It really is. There it is. Look. Rock and Roll Unraveled. I'll just show you the page or whatever. I'll just open it. Look, see. Everything about everything there. Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that fantastic? Look at the thickness of it. Be a good door stopper as well.
Absolutely. That'll keep your door closed.
Oh, Paul McDonough, all the way from, I don't know where he is now, because he was in America the last time. You know, the lad who plays John Lennon.
All right.
Paul Mac, brilliant. He looks like him and sings like him. He was in the Backbeat Beatles.
Oh, right.
Was Paul. He was in the back. He was brilliant, I went down to see him, the Backbeat Beatles, that is. And absolutely brilliant, honestly. Do you know what? Now here's something he doesn't know, Paul. He gave a little rooftop tour thing. You know, when they were taking off, I'll tell you when it was. It was in the Capital of Culture year, 2008. And they were on top of the library in William Brown Street. You know, they doing like a rooftop concert.
Yeah, brilliant.
You know, like you see in Get Back.
Yeah.
You know, the last concert. That's what they were doing. Brilliant, honestly, absolutely. He's in Tampa. Florida.
Wow.
But, bloody a whopper, isn't he? Just spoke to Francis Lawton, mate. He's up for it. He's going to sort a date. Should be a great discussion. Thank you, Tommy Batty. Thank you. Thank you so much for getting hold of him. Thank you so much. Anyway, Derek, what are we talking about tonight? Because you've got something there special, haven't you?
Yeah, I thought we'd talk about some of the people who influenced the Beatles. I mean, they influenced a whole load of people. But I thought we'd look at some of the less well-known people that influenced them. I mean, having said that, it's worth just kicking off. Last time we were chatting, we were talking about Bob Dylan. And then we mentioned the fact that he was a big influence on the Beatles. And I thought it'd be worth just going a little bit deeper into that to kick off. Because, I mean, John Lennon had a songwriting period he actually called his Dylan period. And what happened is they were doing the Beatles, doing a 3-week residency in Paris at the Olympia Theatre. And Paul must have been doing an interview or something. And a French DJ gave him a copy of Dylan's second album, Freewheeling. And they were absolutely blown away. I mean, John Lennon's quoted as saying, we played it the whole time that we were there. We all went potty on Dylan. I mean, what they did, they bought his first album as well. And they did actually meet Dylan on the 28th of August, 64. They were doing a US tour. And one of the gigs, or after one of the gigs, they met up with Dylan at a hotel. And again, McCartney's quoted as saying, and one thing he introduced us to was pot. So Bob Dylan was very much down that particular route. But on the songwriting front, there's another guy as well that is very much credited with John Lennon's change of style. I mean, it's around the Beatles for Sale, and I'm a Loser tends to be thought of really as the first one that wasn't boy meets girl, boy loses girl kind of song. And influenced by Dylan, but also influenced by a guy called Kenneth Alsop, who you might remember from the BBC Tonight programme. Yeah. And he was a journalist with the Daily Mail and other people. And John Lennon's quoted as saying that he influenced him. And Alsop said much the same thing to John. He said, what you want to do is get away from he loves her, she loves him, and write about something more autobiographical, sort of personal experience. And, you know, you think of Help and all that sort of, you've got to hide your love away, Norwegian Wood. Those are all sort of generally considered to be in the sort of Dylan period. So the Kenneth Alsop as well gave John the same sort of message, I think, sort of coupled with Dylan and Dylan's stream of consciousness, because a lot of Dylan's lyrics were stream of consciousness, I think it's fair to say. And
do you think that, excuse me for butting in there, because that's very interesting. Do you think the way John more or less became an activist, didn't he, against war?
Oh, very much so, yeah.
Do you think that was a little bit of influence off Bob Dylan himself? Because Bob was really into activism at the time. Do you think that he got the influence from him?
I think that's probably part of it. I mean, he did go over and live in America. And at that particular time, I mean, there was a lot going on. And there was a lot of strong feeling against the war, particularly after the Tet Offensive in January 68, when North Vietnam launched simultaneous assaults on about 200 towns and villages simultaneously. I mean, a lot were fought back the same day, the same week, but one or two went on for 2 or 3 months. Quezon, not Quezon, the old capital. I can't remember.
Phnom Penh, is it?
No, it wasn't Phnom Penh. I can't remember which one it was now. But you know, it took about 3 months. But that was really when the mood in America very much turned against the war. I mean, there was a lot of anti-war feeling before that. And it was the peace talks actually started shortly after that. But the Paris peace talks took about 3 to 4 years before the war was actually ended. Yeah. So it was a strange time, really. Yeah.
Well, he went out in the John, and his Christmas song, "Happy Xmas, War is Over." The That's thing is, if you want it, there was, "Happy Xmas, War is Over," and what came out, "If you want it." That was brilliant.
That's quite profound. Yeah, that's
quite profound. It's absolutely brilliant. If you want it. Because any war, if you want it, can be over. Like today in the Ukraine, anything. See, I don't want to get into any controversy in this show, but, it could have easily have been stopped back in April, but Boris Johnson scuppered it when there was a peace negotiation on the table last April between Zelensky and Putin. But he went over to Kiev and scuppered all negotiations, and it carried on, and thousands of people have been killed. And I blame it all on Boris Johnson and our American friends, because obviously Biden must have said to Johnson, "Get over there now, you're nearer to tell him no negotiations," and he did. He went and Anyway, sorry about that. Okay, so you're saying, now funny enough, Dennis Paparak, He's in a band called the Incurables in America. He's
Yeah.
American, fully American. And he said, I was mentioning, I said, I'm going to ask Derek Shelmerdine, Derek about harmonies and, and everything else. And he mentioned they took notice or, inspiration from the Everly Brothers. And that's what you mentioned as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of similarity there. I mean, but there were some other good harmony groups as well. People like the Searchers. I mean, they had great harmony. They really did. Funny enough, I was just flashing through some sort of YouTube stuff the other day, and I came across the Searchers as a guest on the Little and Large show. And the Searchers were there, and obviously Little and Large were singing and playing guitar and fooling around a little bit. But what happened was that Sid Little, he started singing and stuff, and then Eddie Large said, "Oh, can you help him out a bit?" And they came in with the harmonies before, and it was really marked just how good those harmonies were. I mean, they really did have some. Well, they were pretty much all lead singers really in the Searchers, so they had plenty of scope. And the Hollies as well, I think, is another band that had some very strong harmonies. Yeah.
I tell you what, you mentioned the Hollies there. I tell you what was a great song, Carry On.
Yeah.
The harmonies in Carry On was absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, they had some great songs.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd say the other thing as well, just looking at who was influencing the Beatles, the beat poets and writers of the time on both sides of the Atlantic had some serious input into the Beatles. I mean, one that isn't that well known, the British beat writer Royston Ellis. I mean, he's really interesting. He's very much thought of as a sort of UK Allen Ginsberg. And he picked up on the idea, Ellis, the American beat poets used to have jazz musicians playing behind them. He liked that. So he got British musicians playing behind him. And there's a famous, there's a plaque actually in a pub called Ye Crack in 13 Rice Street. Royston Ellis came up to Liverpool in the June of 1960. It was a Festival of Arts, Liverpool University. And John Lennon, Stuart Sutcliffe, Bill Harry, who was the guy that went on to found Merseybeat, and a guy called Rod Murray were in the audience. And they went afterwards. They went off to this pub, Ye Crack, 13 Rice Street. And they talked about it. And on the plaque, it gives some examples of what they were saying. And it says, after the four came here to discuss what they'd heard, they were unimpressed and decided to put Liverpool on the map, each in their own way, as the dissenters. And, each of them in their own way, really. I mean, Stuart Sutcliffe sadly didn't live long enough to put his mark as much as he would have done in the art field.
Do you reckon that? That's a good one, that. About Stuart Sutcliffe. I actually gave a talk, a bit of a lecture in Stuart Sutcliffe's home in Second Park.
Yeah.
I was asked to go down there. It's changed from the house, but he had his room and this living room, but his room was pictures up, his original pictures, by the way.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I had to look around, they showed me around, and I had to look. The thing is, there's nothing really mentioned about Stuart Sutcliffe, yet he's called the fifth Beatle. Do you reckon that if he would have lived, he would have been in the band, or do you reckon that he would have just left? Because he started going with a photographer, didn't he? Astrid, was it? Astrid,
yeah, Kesey.
Kesey, that's it. He started knocking about with her. Do you reckon that he would have stayed with the Beatles?
No, he'd already left essentially when he died. What happened? They went over to Hamburg on that first trip from about the August to December, late November, December. And Sir Stuart Sutcliffe actually stayed over there with Astrid, his girlfriend, or might have been fiancée at some point. And that was why Paul McCartney moved to bass across that time. I can't remember the guy's name now offhand, but for 4 gigs across that Christmas period, there was one of their mates who played in the Blackjacks with Pete Best, and he stood in on bass, but he went back to Tech College or university or whatever it was at the end of that. So apparently John suggested to George that he should pick up bass, but George was having none of it. But, you know, that was when Paul McCartney moved to bass. So when they went back to Hamburg the second time, technically Stuart Sutcliffe was still in the band, but he only stood in now and again. Apparently he never really enjoyed it. I mean, he did sell one of his paintings. It was an abstract expressionist piece called Summer Painting for about 50 or 60 quid or something. It was at the John Moore's exhibition. And at the end of the exhibition, somebody, I think the organisers bought that, and he bought his first bass guitar with that. But he'd effectively left the band after that first Hamburg trip. Apparently he never enjoyed it. He never really cracked playing the bass, I don't think. And he used to stand with his back to the audience. So he was
I'm sorry, there, because that's fascinating. Suppose that he would have still been in the band as a bass player. What would McCartney have played?
Well, there were 3 guitarists, of course, up until that point. John, George, and Paul all played guitar. They had occasional drummers. Tommy Moore was probably the most like a regular drummer for I'm not sure how long, few months, and he left. And then Pete Best came for 2 years, but one of them would have. Well, if he had been into the bass and he had really got up to this to that standard and carried on, I guess one of them would have moved over to piano, probably Paul. I mean, John does play piano as well. I think George was very much always going to be the guitarist. Although, I mean, there are some bands. I mean, Lynyrd Skynyrd famously had 3 guitarists, 3 lead guitarists. So, you know, who knows? Maybe the Beatles might have been the British Lynyrd Skynyrd with 3 lead guitarists. But I think what would have been more likely, I think he died of a brain hemorrhage when he was about 20, 21. And I think if he hadn't, I think he'd have become a successful British painter, because he seems to be very highly rated by lots of people who, you know about these things. So I think more likely he'd have gone off in that direction. Stayed great friends with John, because of course that's where they met, at art college.
Do you know, I'll tell you something there. When I used to bring people around, still do now and again, just private tours, I used to go to this place by Abercrombie Square. It used to be the science building. Well, it's still there today. And the janitor, but he wasn't just the janitor, I'm sorry, he was the manager of the whole of the place, to keep the riffraff out, you know, like me. But he knew me. He liked me. And he said, I'm going to show you something, Frank. I said, go ahead. And anyway, he brought me up, went in the lift, and we went on the roof. And he said, do you see all that? I said, yeah, big high wall, you know, right around, big high wall. I said, yeah. And what it was graffiti, it was letters, all painted, you know, different colours and whatever. And he said, do you see that section there? I said, yeah. He said, do you know who painted that? I said, no. He said, well, 2 of them. And that was John Lennon. And I'm sure he said Stuart Sutcliffe. I'm sure.
I think you're right. They definitely did some painting together. They did it. This
was on a wall. This was like graffiti. Must have been. I said, did the, like, you know, was the like practicing or whatever? He said, no, they used to come up. He said, not just John and you know, anyone else, but all the students of the painters, whatever, arts, used to come up and just talk, you know, things like that. He said, but that is John. I'm sure he said Stuart Sutcliffe. I'm sure.
Yeah, he did.
Earlier.
Yeah, because I mean, famously, they did some painting at the Casbah and one of Alan Williams' clubs, maybe the Jacaranda
Yeah.
And Alan Williams agreed that they could play at his club if they painted some walls for him and did a bit of work for him.
Wow.
So, I mean, almost certainly it could well have been Stuart Sutcliffe, because I know they did do some stuff together.
Wow, that's unbelievable, that, because
Yeah.
when you get, I was just taken aback, to be honest.
Yeah.
I said to the fella, I don't know whether he's still there, I'm going back years ago, and I said, if I bring people, I said, can I go up? He said, yeah, as long as there's not too many. He said, you bring loads around. I said, no, just a hand-picked few. And he said, yeah. And I used to bring them up. And show them, and they were amazed.
Yeah.
They were amazed at, these like graffiti things.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. When I brought it, what was his name? I brought him with me.
Right.
And I said, will you tell them who painted that, And he told them.
Yeah.
He told them. And I know a lad, Jared Fleming, and he's a big Beatle thing, and he's been to some places about the Beatles, and he's a great photographer.
Oh, right.
I was telling him about it, and I got him in, and he took a few photographs.
Wow.
And he said, funny enough, that's his style. That was his style when he was younger. John Lennon's, that is.
Yeah.
That's his style. It's strange, isn't it? Strange when you're looking at these things.
Yeah. He's very talented, Lennon, in a number of directions.
He was a great orator.
Yeah.
That's what people tend to forget. He was a great orator. When you see him, I'm not saying with Yoko, but when you see him giving interviews, especially on American television, because when he went over there, he's interview after interview, he was brilliant.
Yeah.
He was intellectual, wasn't he? He's just intellectual. But what I can't get over, Derek, is Lennon and McCartney in that Get Back, the new film that came out, after being revamped, digitalized or whatever way they call it now. And you just see them sitting there playing, but they're playing nothing. They
That's
just
right.
make it up. And they haven't even put words to it, but they got the music together. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, they put words to it, and they're just sitting there putting words and singing. Yeah. And I always remember one scene, Derek, where George Harrison said, he was saying about, I've written a song here, he said, and I don't know what to put it, something in the way she moves it was.
Yeah.
And I think it was that. Anyway, he was asking for a word. And I think it was like something in the way she moves, but he couldn't find a word, move, if you know what I mean. And Lennon, I think, said it down and said something in the way she, like a cauliflower or something like that, But this is the way it was, and absolutely brilliant, those lads, and to write 14 songs in 2 weeks with music. The lyrics,
just write them as they went along. I mean, I think what that shows as well is that they are probably the best ever example of the whole being far, far, far greater than the sum of the parts. I mean, if you look at the songs they've all written since, they've all written some good stuff, but they've never written Another Day in the Life, Another Yesterday. And I think what Get Back showed was just how they fed off each other. And I think even they underestimated just how important each was to the other. Because, I mean, what that did show, as you say, they came into the studio effectively with just about nothing, a bit of a tune in the back of the mind. And then 3 weeks later, they've got some of the best songs of all time written. And that I think, to me, really showed one of the things that stood the Beatles apart, just when they were together, they just grew into something unique. Absolutely did. Because
do you know what? I'm going to ask Paul McDonough, who plays John Lennon. I'm going to ask him a question here because he's still listening in all the way from America.
All right.
And I'm going to ask him this. Paul, what's your favourite Lennon song that you sing on stage? What's your favourite Lennon song that you sing? I've got Andy Gamble. There's Andy. There he is. Oh, there's my mate. Oh, that's great. There he is.
Hey, Frank. Hi, Derek.
Hi, Andy.
Hey, Andy, mate. How are you?
I'm okay. It's later than usual, as always. I apologise.
No. Listen, Andy, your dad tried to ring me, but I rang him back, on that FaceTime thing. And he's trying to get on. And Jason hasn't got anything, like any background stuff, so we could send him a link or anything, unfortunately.
He's just phoned me now as I was on the way back. So he's on now. He's actually watching.
Oh, is he? Oh, brilliant.
He's on.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, that's lovely.
So
that's
just
lovely.
Another apology before we carry on, Frank. Is obviously I've got 5 kids here, 4 daughters and 1 boy. I've come to the quietest place in the house, but I guarantee you there's going to be interruptions. I guarantee you that. So I apologise in advance.
So you're in the loft.
I'm in the loft. Well, I'm in what they call the man cave, which is the extension at the back of the house. It's the worst internet I've had, honest to God. I've had the nightmare getting online. It wouldn't accept the browser I was on. Then I lost the internet connection. So I've been running around like an headless chicken. But I'm here now anyway. I'm here now. But I have been listening in via the iPad to Derek.
Have you? Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely fine, yeah.
Listen, can I ask you here? Can I ask you now? Oh, yeah. Paul McDonough, I've just asked Paul, Andy and Derek, what's the best song? Or, he sings, his favourite, not the best, his favourite song. And he said, I am the Walrus. It's very idiosyncratic Lennon song and hard to pull off. Would you agree with that, Derek?
Yeah, I think that is a great song. I actually like some of the earlier ones as well, like I'm a Loser and stuff. I'm a Walrus. I mean, that is a great song. There's no choice.
That I'm a Loser. I'm going to ask Andy here because he's the front man for a great band. It really is, honestly. Searching, and they get invited over. I know that he gets invited over to Germany, to perform over there, and that's how influential his band is. The tribute band to the Searchers. The thing, and No Reply, says Paul McDonough. No Reply, he also says. So I'm going to ask Andy, what influenced you, Andy, about the Searchers and why you wanted to, be them, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, good question. And it's a question that we get asked quite a lot as a band. And in short, it was back in 2005, 2006, when we very first started. We were going to a local jam night called Merseycats, which is still very much going now in the oldie club. It operates every Thursday. And used to have a lot of 60s musicians going down there. Now, last time Derek was on the show, he was talking about Jeff Nugent and the Undertakers, Fat Flamingos, Lee Curtis and the All-Stars. These are the musicians that would be there. So very early on, we wanted to recreate music that no one else was doing. So, for instance, you had Jeff. He would obviously do his own stuff. He'd do a twist then on the likes of Buddy Holly. He would be doing some of the Beatles songs, some Buddy Holly songs, etc. But there was no one really that was doing any of the Searchers songs. So we quickly dabbled on a couple of the Searchers ones. It's a funny story because obviously the band is called Searching. When we very first started, the very first song that we learned of the Searchers was When You Walk in the Room. So we were quickly known as the Walk in the Room Boys, which didn't sound that good, So we had to change it quite quickly. And obviously Del Shannon, the Coasters, they sang a song called Searching. And it was a close friend of ours, a guy called Will Mount, who suggested, why don't you call the band Searching? That was roughly in around 2008, 2009. And the name has just stuck with us. We quickly then went on because we managed to get the harmonies spot on. We managed to get the guitar work, the drum work. Again, I was hearing one of your guests on the Friday, Frank, speaking about, I think it was the guy from Chicago. He was saying, what's the difference between a covers band and a tribute band? But the tribute band has to be bang on, not necessarily.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That comes up with wigs or anything. I'm not knocking that, but it's about the music authenticity. You've got to be spot on with it. With the covers, you can get away with it a little bit, So as I say, we started all the musicianships, the guitar work, the drum work, and then we started looking then at more complex Searchers songs. Needles and Pins, perfect example. Sweet's My Sweet, Sugar the Spice, Take Me For What I'm Worth, Someday We're Gonna Love Again. And there's some that we've tried that just don't sound right. And if you look back on the Searchers tours that they've ever done, some of them, they don't even sing it. It's all studio recorded and then released. They don't actually do them live. So that's, a long answer to a short question was, that's the answer. Why we just wanted to do stuff that nobody else was doing. And even today, we look at the bands that are on the circuit now. We're quite fortunate enough to be on that circuit. And, on our weekends off, we'll go around, support live music, especially on our Tuesdays down the oldie, as you know, I run, Frank. And you're seeing what kind of music they're playing. So we tend, again, to stay away from that kind of music and learn something that nobody else is playing, so that we can offer something that when we go around to the social clubs, the lab clubs, wherever we're playing, we can offer that something more that nobody else is playing. Perfect example there again, Derek's just been talking about the Hollies. We've tried to learn some of the Hollies songs, and there are some bands on the circuit who are doing Hollies songs, they really are, but unfortunately, they can't get to the vocal pitch that the Hollies can. So what tends to happen is you start getting the musicians who are dropping the keys then to suit the vocals range. And for me, you tend to lose the tune. So our motto has always been, if you can't do it like the song and do it in the key of the song, then we simply leave it and move on. But there are some cracker songs by the Hollies. Bus Stop I particularly like. Look Through Any Window. There's a good couple of them. But unfortunately, we just have not been able to do them.
That's unbelievable, that, because it's only like how you got your name and everything else. I really just thought, because you sound like them, obviously sound like them, that, searching, I just thought that automatically came to the bands, if you like.
It was a good little thing to go at, the Searchers, but again, if you start looking at, it's quite hard to explain this one, but we've been billed at a couple of places as a Searchers tribute band, and the ticket sales and stuff wasn't that great, I've got to be honest. But then they mixed it up and changed it Searchers / Merseybeat tribute band, and that was it. And we were okay then, we were flying, you know what I mean? We were getting gigs, the agents then were on board with us. And even when you talk about going out to Germany, we've been fortunate to play out there, done a few tours out there, which was absolutely fantastic. But we've never ever been billed as a Searchers tribute. It's always been Searchers / Merseybeat tribute, because obviously we hit on the likes of Billy J. Kramer, Jerry and the Pacemakers, and Everton, the Beatles, Billy Fiore. So yeah, it's quite good. And something I only learned, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that Derek, you might know this, even Frank, to be honest with you, is that Billy Fiore never ever played the Cavern. I didn't know that. I thought he'd actually played the Cavern multiple times, but he didn't.
Well, the thing is, I've had Jeff Hogarth on here, and he actually owns the Iron Door, and
right.
It's Jason's uncle, actually, Jason Pennington, the producer, and I had him on, and I'm so surprised what he was saying to me, who was on the Iron Door, because I used to go to the Iron Door, and the band, the regular band, shall we say, the resident band, was the Searchers.
Yeah.
And I used to love them. Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. And the thing is, he said, the Beatles actually performed in the Iron Door. The Beatles performed, and I didn't know that. And it's just like you, Andy, you just don't know, like, the venues that these unbelievable bands played at. You just don't know. It's like I just mentioned about to Derek, about this particular roof. I'll try and get you up there to show you one day in the summer, if I'm able, that is. I'll get you on the route to show you this artwork. And as I said, there's one wall, part of the wall that was painted by Lennon. And it's great graffiti, by the way. And I'm sure he said Stuart Sutcliffe. I'm sure he said it. It was him.
It almost certainly would have been.
I'll bring it up there.
Yeah, I tell you, there's an interesting parallel there with Billy Fury in the Cavern. If you look at the British invasion that came in 1964 when the Beatles cracked America, basically, and then British groups followed in their footsteps. I mean, the first wave, of course, being Merseybeat groups. But what was interesting is the people who had been 50s stars in the UK, like Cliff Richard, like Tommy Steele, like Billy Fury, they never made any headway whatsoever in the wake of the British invasion. And it might have been that the Cavern was like almost a different generation almost of acts to where Billy Fury would perform. I'm not saying that might have been a conscious thing, but it's just a really interesting parallel there in terms of generations, because Billy Fury is really, if you like, first generation, well, technically first 1.5 generation British rock and roll artists, and none of them found fame in the 1960s, and certainly the British invasion. You had the same thing going on again, because Cliff Richard was actually in the charts when the Beatles cracked the American charts with "Wanna Hold Your Hand" in '64. I think Dusty Springfield and there was Dusty Springfield, Cliff Richard, and one other I can't. Oh, Frank Ifield, who technically isn't British, but had a lot of success in the UK. So I always found that really quite interesting, how none of the 50s artists managed to capitalize on what became a really big market for British bands. People like Herman's Hermits. I
was watching something on YouTube, and I'm sitting there, and Freddie and the Dreamers.
Yes.
They came on, but they were in America.
Yeah,
and
they had about half a dozen hits.
They were doing all this stupid stuff. I had to turn it off. I went mad. I was going mad. I was already in a bad mood. Liverpool got beat on.
Chubby Checker had his last American hit with "Do the Freddie," which was a cover of one of Freddie and the Dreamers' last hits.
No
I quite like them because they covered some great R&B.
I won't have you on again. It's terrible. Anyway, listen, Derek, will you stay on for another half hour sure. with Andy? And then leave at 9:30 because I want to talk about football to Andy at 9:30. Do you mind?
Perfect.
Well, you can stay on and
No, I would contribute nothing to that, mate. Absolutely.
No, okay. So listen, because Charlie Kane says it's bagging time, Frank. I need a gold watch. That means a scotch. So we have a clip on, and right after the clip. We'll carry on with what we're talking about. Is that okay with you? She died in 1860. And, just a wonderful story about it. I could go on forever. But, we've got to get back to Derek and yourself. Derek, right. You mentioned the Beatles. You mentioned Stuart Sutcliffe. You mentioned that, where they got their inspiration from. Who do you reckon was the greatest band to come out of America? Who would you say, Andy, as well? Who would you say the greatest band? Not like Elvis or anything. I don't mean an individual singer, a solo one.
Frank Zappa has to be up there, almost in a league of his own. I mean, the range of the music is from, full-on classical to avant-garde jazz, pure rock and roll. He does doo-wop. And obviously most of the stuff is written by Zappa. I mean, he's the one that would spring to mind if you're looking at, a true great to come across the water from America.
Do you know who I liked? But I'd have to name two, unfortunately. I have to cheat. Credence and Canned Heat.
Oh, brilliant Canned Heat, yeah.
Oh,
amazing.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
So who, as you say, Andy, who do you reckon that, who you liked who came out of America?
Sorry, I lost internet connection there, so only briefly heard. Best American band for me probably would have been, I'm going to embarrass myself here now, actually, and I do listen to them quite regularly, the Beach Boys.
The Beach Boys. I knew you'd say that. I knew you'd say that.
Well,
another one I'd have is Lynyrd Skynyrd. Absolutely.
Yeah, Lynyrd Skynyrd, yeah.
Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Funny enough, we do a couple of their songs in our set, which is, as you just mentioned, Creedence Clearwater.
Did you Creedence?
Yeah, we do Bad Moon Rise. Again, yeah, and that's probably one of the only songs I can play on guitar, Frank. It's only 3 chords. But yeah.
Absolutely.
Listen to the story somewhere again. I'm not really into the things behind albums or something, but obviously Derek will know this one about the was it the Sgt. Pepper album? And once the Beach Boys did that, they turned around and said that's the album that we should have recorded, and they sort of didn't record again or something like that. I'm sure.
What's interesting is that the Beatles also credit a lot of Pepper with Pet Sounds. So I think there's sort of a great mutual admiration going on there because they're 2 of the greatest albums ever written, really. And each band gives the other lots of credit for their own stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I was just thinking there. When you get these bands and the likes of the Beach Boys. Who's the Joe? Hang on, I'm a yesterday man. Who sang that?
Chris Andrews.
That's him, right. Did you know what he said about the Beatles? Never forget it. This is at the time, by the way. He said, they'll never make it. He said, Andy, Derek, that's what he said. Never forget that. That's always stuck with me. Going right back then, to the 60s. They'll never make it, he said.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of bands in history that have had that comment, though, haven't they? Or even solo artists. Going back now a bit into the 90s, Gary Barlow, perfect example. You'll never ever make it. You're not a good enough singer, songwriter, for instance. And look at him now. Look at him today. He's amazing. Isn't he? He's away with it. So I think that's happened historically right the way through, but just fancy saying to the Beatles, no. And I always feel sorry for the Beatles managers that didn't work, you know what I mean? Alan Williams, for instance, and, poor Sam Leach. I know Sam Leach was more of a promoter, but, just think you've had this band that changed the world and they just went. They were,
he made a lot of money, didn't he? He gave the Beatles away.
Yeah. Well, I always remember going down, I think it was in Matthew Street, was it the Penny Farthing? Alan Williams used to be in there and he'd be telling the story. If you bought him a pint, he would tell you the story about how he lost the Beatles and all this kind of stuff. I've got his autograph somewhere on a beer mat, would you believe? I've got it somewhere, I'll have to dig it out.
Do you know what? You're right there, because it was a lovely summer's day and I was down on Matthew Street and I just finished a walk. And anyway, I went into the Grapes and there's Alan there. Honestly, and there was a couple of friends, so he's having a couple of beers, and I went like that. I said, and it was my turn to get around, and I went, I say like, Andy, Derek, what do you want? And Alan was standing there, and don't forget he's in the queue, and I went, he said, you've forgotten my name. You've forgotten my name. I was so upset. I went, I haven't. Daddy says you have not.
Yeah.
Yes,
there is a story. There is a story that Alan Williams actually threw Judy Garland out of one of his clubs. They had a bit of a falling out, and he tossed her out. She was appearing in Manchester or somewhere, I think, or it might have been. I don't think it was Liverpool, but they were having some kind of after show party. Drink, and he
the Blue Angel.
Whether it's actually apocryphal, I don't know, but it's a great.
Was the Blue Angel?
It was the Blue Angel, yeah.
No, it is. It was the Blue Angel.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
you got
again,
through out there.
the Blue Angel, that was historical for having Merseybeat bands in yet again, weren't it? The Blue Angel.
Oh,
gosh,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Very much.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's the Crying Shames or Clayton Squares again. They started there. It was someone very early like that. I'm certain of it.
Love the
Now,
Crying
there's a
Shames.
state. Now, you've just mentioned a group there, Andy, the Crying Shames.
Yeah, yeah.
And their song, I've never heard anyone so passionate sing it. I forget the title of the song.
Sins
now.
of the Family.
That's
You think
right.
the Sins of the Family? It's a P.F. Sloan song
Do
originally.
you know anything about them, Derek?
It's brilliant.
Can you tell us a little bit about them? The Crying Shame.
To be honest, I don't really know an awful lot about them. I mean, that one particular single, I've got a copy of it. It's one of my all-time favorite songs. But it's a band I don't really know an awful lot about offhand. I don't think anybody from the Crying. I mean, unlike so many Liverpool bands in the late 50s and the early 60s, the members went from one band to another. But I'm not aware of anyone, I think, in the Crying Shames who went on to, international stardom, as it were. I might be wrong.
He didn't. It was. I mean, I know a couple of little things about the band. Firstly, the drummer was a fella called Charlie Gallagher. He's still going today. He done a brief stint with Carl Teddy and the Cruisers quite recently.
Yeah.
But then there's another way around. There was a guy called Dave Ferguson. Don't know whether you've heard of him. He has a big online presence, but he was in a Merseybeat band called the Bumbleys, and he went from the Bumbleys to the Crying Shame. So he's not an original by any stretch. A bit like Frankie Allen coming to the Searchers. He's not an original, but he was there for a hell of a long time, so he was classed as an original. They're the only one. They're the only people I know out of that particular band. But they were cracking. They were really good.
Oh, they were a brilliant live band.
Yeah, they're really good. I mean, another band that you don't really hear about, but when you do your homework and you listen to them, the Black Knights, Alan Schroeder on the drums, they were the actual backing band, I'm led to believe, when Jerry was singing Ferry Cross the Mersey upon the ferry. They were the backing band. Not a lot of people know that. And again, do your homework on it, and you can actually, so it wasn't the Pacemakers that was on board, it was actually the Black Knights that was supporting them. So there's loads of stuff. I love hearing it. Again, when you go to places like Mersey Cats, for instance, or even our Tuesday night rock. I've got to get it in, haven't I, Frank? Rocking at the Oldie. We do have a lot of 60s Merseybeat musicians that come along, even if they're just coming for a drink. Or, I mean, talk about Alan Schroeder, the Black Knights. He was in Cliff Robertson, the Rockers. He's now with the KB Skifflers and another band, would you believe, called Blind Scouts. He's up there every single week, and you get to talk to him, and he can tell you so many stories about the Beatles, about the Searchers. Jerry the Pacemakers, Cilla Black, all this had Billy J, for instance. There's loads, and you're just thinking to yourself, I can go online and look at Wikipedia, or I can go down a club like that of a Tuesday and listen to it firsthand. It's great. It's absolutely brilliant.
Just while we're talking about bands from this era, one of the things, one of the big influences on the Beatles, of course, was Little Richard. And they covered his Kansas City hey 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 thing. But what I was going to say, as what we're saying now, Little Richard and the Beatles played New Brighton on the 12th of October '62, and the bill that night was absolutely awesome. The Beatles were there. They just released Love Me Do. Big Three and the Merseybeats were on the bill. The Undertakers were there, and the Four J's, who became the foremost. But what was quite fascinating was that Pete McLean and the Dakotas were there, and also Billy No J Kramer and the Coasters. And what happened was Brian Epstein spotted Billy J. Kramer and the Coasters and said, hey, do you want to go professional? And of course, the Coasters didn't. They wanted to stay with their apprenticeships and things. So Billy J., Brian Epstein teamed Billy Kramer up with the Dakotas, who technically from Manchester. And it was John Lennon who suggested that he perhaps ought to put a J in the name. Lee Curtis and the All-Stars were there. Pete Best had only just joined because, of course, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes were also there. But Ringo had recently left them for the same reason that Pete Best had recently joined Lee Curtis. And by today's standards, a ticket for that particular gig was 10 quid. It was 10 and 6. And I checked it out, and the inflation across from then to now is about 20 times. So that 10 and 6 ticket would now cost you about 10 quid to see. And there were a couple of other bands who were less well known also at the gig. And Little Richard, of course, is there. So you got the Beatles, Little Richard, the Big Three, the Mersey Beats, the Undertakers, and a bunch.
Well, very sad. Very sadly, Derek, Frank, we lost a true Merseybeat hero around Christmas time, but it was his funeral on Saturday, the famous King-size Taylor, Ted Taylor.
Yeah. We were talking about him the other week.
Yeah, it was his funeral on Saturday. And again, you start looking at the stars that he's mixed with, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, as you say. There's been ton, and again, like more recent as well. There was, and his name escapes me now, Elvis's guitarist, James Burton.
Yeah.
It was great, and you're seeing him and there's all kinds of pictures. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, he plays on all of Ricky Nelson's songs. So he was with Ricky Nelson from the very early days, through to the 70s when he joined Elvis.
Right.
Can I just read out a few comments, please? Can I? It's only like from the clip as well. And Brian Headley says, we need Kitty to fix our squad. That's Liverpool's squad there, Andy.
Yeah.
The background music from your clip brings me right back to Old Trafford in the FA Cup 1999. The famous Man United went to Rome to see the Pope sing all day in the away end. Right. So I've got to go down here. Mark Kinney says, I so wish they'd made a better statue in St. George's Hall of Kitty Wilkinson. I could give you the story about that, Mark. I really could. Karen Kariakou. Kitty Wilkinson, a proud lady doing what she needed to do. God bless her. One of my favourite women of Liverpool's history. Absolutely. Absolutely, Karen. Give me regards to Steve. Neil Broderick says, I can't say, I'm going to do football in a few minutes' time. Louise McTiernan, Louise, how are you, sweetheart? I hope you're well. And she sends Frank a big heart. Sorry, boys.
Me and Derek, nothing there, no?
No, when the lads put the X's on, they're for you, lot.
Yeah.
Well, you're all right. You're not left out. You're all right. Yesterday, man, sung by Chris Andrews, Frank. Yesterday's Charlie Cairns, yeah. Half man, half biscuit. There was a professional snooker ref from down the street here by the name of Len Ganley, who had him in one of their videos, only info lads. Len, I remember him. So anyway, what I'm going to go and do, I'm sorry about this, Derek. I'm going to talk about football. Is that all right?
That's perfect, mate.
Have you got any idea who you'll be talking about next?
Well, I was thinking, Eric Clapton was the first person, possibly still the only person, to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 3 times, the Cream himself and the Yardbirds. But I thought it'd be fun to look at before he was famous and some of the early stuff he was with, because he's got, he crosses over. There's 3 degrees of separation between Eric Clapton and the Beatles.
Well, okay. If I ask you to bring in a band, and to talk about them as well on the same show,
okay,
when you come back, can you talk about Status Quo?
Yeah,
Status Quo, because I went to see them once and they were brilliant. They really were brilliant. Quo. I like Quo. Do you know? At the time, I liked Status Quo, ELO, and Rainbow. You can't get any better than that, could you? Now it sounds like a little poem. Anyway,
There's a great, just a quick one, the great 3 degrees of separation between Rainbow and the Searchers, because without Chris Curtis, who left the Searchers to form Roundabout, that became Deep Purple.
Go away.
Absolutely.
Go away.
Chris Chubby. Yeah.
There would be no Deep Purple without the Searchers.
Okay,
Well,
all right, before you go, Derek, before you go, and this will, obviously it's going to interest Andy. Are Liverpool going to get 4th place? I'm only joking. I'm only getting a clear. I'm only kidding.
Save that one for me, Derek. I'll answer that one.
Do you know when you look at what's his name? He left the Searchers. And
Mike Pender.
Hey.
Mike Pender.
No. This is when they first started off, and they sang a couple of songs like "Sweet for Me Sweet," and he was on it on Needles and Pins.
Tony Jackson.
Tony Jackson.
Yeah.
Why did he leave?
Well, he formed his own band, the Vibrators, didn't he?
Yeah, there's loads of high-class conspiracy about that one. Because he went on and joined another band, didn't he? I mean, for me,
but I got told, Andy, that he has a big argument with Chris Curtis because he started the group Chris Curtis and he got shut of him. That's what I was told way back then because I thought Tony Jackson was great.
Yeah, he was.
His harmony with Mike Pender.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I was just about to say. I think once Tony went and ultimately Mike went, the harmony kind of thing just totally went because that's what the Searchers were synonymous for, the harmonies. You know, the Beatles, don't get me wrong, could harmonise, the biggest band in the world, but they were rip raw. That's what the Beatles, to me, that's what the Beatles were. They were raw. You know, they came out with the leather jackets on, especially when they come back from Hamburg and stuff like that. But the Searchers were all, you know, boots, shirt, ties, all that kind of stuff. So they brought a completely different thing to Merseybeat. And then obviously once Epstein got involved, the Beatles smartened themselves up. But again, when Tony went and then Chris Curtis kind of came to the forefront to try and front the band, it didn't sound the same. And then he started standing up and playing the kit. It just lost the dynamic of that band for me at that time. But, you know, what a band they are. And, you know, they're still going. I'm led to believe, again, the longest rock and roll surviving band, or Merseybeat band, certainly. They retired. I think they retired 2018-19, and now they're back again for the thank you tour. So they're probably back next year as well for the thank you tour.
Thanks again.
If you was being here, I think it was last week. I don't know what bloody day it was. Could have been last Friday. I don't know. I was doing this, you know, one of the clips. And I was doing the St. James's Cemetery. Right, and Jason put on, you know, at the end of the clip, my song, the record that I made about Kitty Wilkins.
Oh, yeah, that was last Friday, that.
That was last Friday.
I heard that, yeah. Well, that's what put me on.
Doing that.
That's what put me on to start doing my background about Kitty Wilkinson and about the bag washing and the little laundrette and stuff like that. Yeah, that was last Friday, that.
I thought you was going to say you were awful. Charlie Cairns, he comes on, he said, "You're not going to sing, are you?" Anyway, Derek, I've got to talk about football, unfortunately.
Oh, it's been great, mate.
Will you come on, obviously, will you come on and talk about Quo and all these other bands?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it'd be interesting to sort of have Quo and Eric Clapton in sort of juxtaposition.
Yeah, Clapton, yeah absolutely. Early days. Thank you, Derek. So I'll have you on next week or the week after, whatever. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll sort it out with Jason.
Thank you so much, Derek.
I enjoy it, mate. Well, all
the best.
Cheers, Derek. Bye, mate.
I've got the wrong one. Got the wrong one.
I'm back.
Sure, I might see you next week or the week after. I'm awfully sorry.
Stay there. You'll probably get rid of me again. Stay there.
See you later. See you later, Derek.
Cheers.
See you with the